The outpost on planet Velnar 9 was quiet, too quiet for a war zone. The air smelled of iron and dust, and the orange sky never stopped glowing. Private Mason Reeves had been there for 3 months, fixing power lines, cleaning weapons, and trying not to think about how far Earth was. He missed the blue sky, the smell of rain, and the sound of laughter. But on Velnar 9, laughter was rare. Everyone was tired, everyone was scared, and everyone was waiting for the next attack. Mason was just another human soldier in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. But that changed the day she arrived. Her name was Sareen Veltar. She was not human. She was a Valari, one of the mercenary species hired by the Terran Alliance to help fight the border wars. The first time Mason saw her was in the hangar, stepping out of a dropship surrounded by soldiers who kept their distance. She was tall, covered in armor that gleamed like polished silver, her tail swaying behind her like a living banner. Her face was hidden under a sleek helmet, but when she removed it, Mason froze. Her fur was soft gray with a shimmer of blue under the lights. Her eyes glowed golden, sharp, and bright like twin suns. She looked half wild, half noble, something dangerous yet beautiful. Most humans looked away quickly, not wanting to meet that gaze. The Valari were known to be proud and easily offended, but Mason didn't know that. He was just curious, so he smiled and gave her a small wave. "Welcome to Velnar," he said awkwardly. To his surprise, she tilted her head slightly. Her long ears twitched once, and she gave the smallest of nods. It was a simple gesture, but something about it stayed with him. The way she looked, calm, quiet, but watching everything, made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Interest. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not because she was alien, not even because she was beautiful in an otherworldly way. It was because, for the first time in weeks, someone had looked at him and actually seen him. Not just another human soldier. Not just a number in the war. Over the next few days, Mason noticed her everywhere. In the training yard, she moved like liquid steel, every motion perfect and controlled. During briefings, she stood still, silent, her tail flicking slowly when she disagreed. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her voice was calm, low, and oddly melodic. Some soldiers joked that she didn't need words. Her eyes did the talking. Others whispered that she had killed more enemies than the entire outpost combined. But Mason didn't see her that way. He saw her as someone who carried too much weight on her shoulders. He saw the quiet in her eyes, the kind that came from too many battles and too many losses. He knew that kind of silence, and he had it too. One evening, he was fixing a broken generator near the landing pad when she walked past him. The hum of the machine made the air buzz between them. Without thinking, he looked up and said, "You ever get tired of this noise?" She stopped, turning her head slightly toward him. "Noise means life," she replied after a pause. Her accent was sharp but graceful. "Silence means the machine is dead." Mason blinked, then smiled. "Guess that's one way to look at it." She gave a short sound, almost like a quiet laugh, then continued walking. Mason stared after her, a strange warmth in his chest. It was just a small conversation. Only a few words, but to him it felt like something rare in that cold place. Connection. After that, he tried to talk to her more. Small things at first, a greeting in the morning, a comment about the weather, even offering her coffee once, though she sniffed it and said, "Smells like burnt soil." Still, she didn't push him away. That alone was something. As days turned into weeks, Mason found himself looking forward to her presence. She never smiled like humans did, but sometimes her ears would flick in amusement or her tail would curl slightly when she was pleased. He learned that those small gestures meant more than words. The others in the outpost didn't understand. They warned him to stay away from the alien mercenary to mind his place. But Mason didn't listen. Something about Sareen drew him in, not just her strength, but the calm storm behind her eyes. He didn't know it yet, but that small spark of curiosity would soon change everything. And far away, under the burning red sky of Velnar 9, two souls from different worlds began a story that neither of them could have imagined. Days passed, and Mason began to notice small things about Sareen Veltar, things most others never cared to see. She always arrived early for training. She sharpened her blade with a steady rhythm, her golden eyes fixed on the edge until it gleamed. She never wasted movement. Every step was silent, every gesture controlled. Yet sometimes when she thought no one was watching, Mason caught a glimpse of something softer, a quiet sadness in her gaze when she looked up at the stars. He didn't know what she was thinking, but he felt it too, that heavy loneliness that came from being far away from home. The outpost on Velnar 9 was a rough place. Soldiers fought, drank, and shouted to drown out fear, but Sari never joined them. She sat alone, usually near the landing pad, polishing her weapon or staring into the desert night. Mason wanted to talk to her, but he never knew what to say. Every time he walked near her, his words froze. She was so different, her silver fur, her sharp eyes, her silence. Yet something about that silence made him feel calm. One evening during a storm, he found her inside the hangar, watching the rain fall against the shield dome. The storm made a soft hiss like whispering static. Mason walked up beside her. "Do you miss your home?" he asked quietly. Sarian didn't look at him right away. Her tail moved once, slow and thoughtful. "Yes," she said finally. "But my world is not kind. War follows us everywhere." Mason nodded. "Same for humans. We just fight in different ways." She turned to face him then. Her golden eyes caught the dim light glowing faintly. "Why do humans fight?" she asked. He thought for a long moment. "Sometimes for land, sometimes for pride, but mostly," he said softly, "because we don't know how to stop." Sarian stared at him, then gave a small, understanding nod. "Then we are not so different." That simple exchange broke something between them, the wall of silence that had stood since her arrival. After that night, Sarian began to speak a little more. Not much, but enough. She asked questions about Earth, about oceans, about trees, about music. Mason tried to explain everything in simple words, but his voice always softened when he talked about home. Once, he played an old recording on his communicator, a gentle melody from Earth. The sound was warm and flowing, like water under sunlight. Sarian listened without speaking. When it ended, she whispered, "It sounds alive." "It is," Mason said, smiling. "It's called a piano. Humans use it to talk without words." Sarian's ears flicked slightly. Strange, but beautiful. That one word, beautiful, coming from her, made Mason's chest tighten. Over the following weeks, their bond grew quietly. She would wait for him in the evenings, sitting by the same landing pad where they had first met. They would share small stories, small laughs. He told her about the blue seas and the smell of rain. She told him about her world, Velara Prime, where the sky turned crimson at dusk and the sand shimmered under twin suns. "Your world sounds beautiful," Mason said one night. Sarian gave a faint smile. "Beautiful and cruel. The desert gives life, but it also takes it." He looked at her then, really looked, at the scars hidden under her fur, at the tiredness in her golden eyes. "You've seen a lot of cruelty," he said quietly. She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes was enough. There was silence again, but this time it was not cold. It was peaceful, like both of them finally understood something neither could say aloud. When other soldiers noticed Mason spending time with the alien mercenary, they started whispering. Some laughed, others warned him to stay away. But Mason didn't care. To him, Sarian was not just a hired warrior. She was someone real. Someone who carried pain but still stood tall. One night, while repairing a damaged drone, he felt a presence beside him. He looked up to see Sarian holding a light for him. "You should rest," she said softly. He smiled. "Can't sleep." She tilted her head, her voice quiet but sincere. "Then I will keep you company," and she did. For the first time since arriving on Velnar 9, Mason didn't feel alone. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with something warm, something unspoken but alive. He didn't know what to call it yet. Maybe friendship. Maybe more. But as the night stretched on and her golden eyes glowed faintly beside him, Mason knew one thing for sure. The war outside no longer scared him as much as the thought of losing that gentle, silent bond they had found. The nights on Velnar 9 were long and heavy. The desert wind howled against the metal walls, and sometimes the sky flashed red when storms rolled over the horizon. Mason had grown used to the loneliness of the outpost, but lately that feeling was fading every day. He found himself waiting for Sarian, the silver-furred Velari warrior who had somehow made this harsh world feel a little less empty. Their quiet talks had become a part of his daily life. He didn't know what they were to each other, friends, maybe something more, but he knew he couldn't imagine the base without her. That evening, Mason walked to the hangar earlier than usual. He wanted to check the generators before the next shift started. The hangar lights were dim, humming softly, and the air smelled faintly of oil and metal. He thought the place was empty, until he heard a faint sound coming from the back corner. It was Sareen. She was sitting on a crate, half out of her armor. Her back was turned to him and her silver fur shimmered under the soft lights. She was breathing slowly, almost peacefully, her tail curled beside her like a ribbon. Mason froze in place. He didn't mean to stare, and it just happened. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. She looked different like this. Without her armor, she didn't seem like a warrior made of steel and fire. She looked alive, gentle, vulnerable. But then she turned, and their eyes met. In an instant, everything changed. Her golden eyes widened, and her fur flushed into a deep shade of red, spreading from her cheeks down her neck like a wave of fire. Her ears shot upright and her tail puffed in shock. She made a sharp sound and a mix between a gasp and a growl. "Mason," she stammered, her voice trembling in a way he had never heard before. He blinked, realizing too late what had happened. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I thought this place was empty," he said quickly, turning his back at once. His face burned with embarrassment. Behind him, he heard her moving, fast, scrambling to put her armor back on. Her voice was shaky when she finally spoke. "You looked," she whispered, almost to herself. "I didn't mean to," he said again, keeping his eyes down. "I swear, Sareen, I didn't know you were here." Her tone hardened. "In my culture, being seen without armor is private. It means trust, or shame." Mason's heart sank. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I would never disrespect you." For a long time, she didn't answer. Only the low hum of the hangar filled the air. Mason stood there, afraid to move, afraid even to breathe. Finally, he heard her step closer, but her voice was quiet, distant. "You humans never know," she said slowly. "You see everything without knowing what it means." Her words hurt more than any shout could. When he finally turned around, she was already walking toward the door, her helmet in her hands. Her fur was still tinted red, her ears pressed flat against her head. "Sareen, please," he began. But she didn't look back. She just said one word, so soft it almost disappeared into the air. "Enough." And then she was gone. Mason stood there for a long time, the silence pressing against his chest. The hangar felt colder now. The light seemed dull. He sat down on the same crate she had been sitting on, staring at the floor. He had made a mistake. Not one of anger, not one of words, but one of ignorance. He hadn't known her customs, her boundaries, her heart. And now he had broken something fragile, something that had taken weeks to build. That night he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Her wide eyes, the red blush spreading through her fur, the hurt in her voice. He wanted to find her to apologize again, but he didn't know if she would even listen. The next morning, when he saw her in the training yard, she didn't look at him. Her armor gleamed in the sun, her posture stiff, distant. She sparred with another soldier, every movement sharp and cold. The warmth that used to be in her gaze was gone. Mason stood at a distance, his chest aching. He wanted to call out to her to explain, but the words died before leaving his lips. He realized then that sometimes silence could cut deeper than any blade. Sareen had built walls around herself again, and Mason didn't know how to reach her. But deep inside, he promised himself one thing. He would earn her trust back, no matter how long it took, because even if she never said it, he knew she had once cared. He had seen it in her eyes, in her voice, in the quiet way she stayed beside him during the lonely nights. And now, all of that was slipping away, because of one accidental glance. The days that followed were heavy with silence. The outpost on Velnar 9 still buzzed with life. Machines humming, soldiers training, radio chatter filling the air. But for Mason, everything felt dull and distant. The warmth that once came from his small talks with Sareen had vanished. She no longer greeted him, no longer joined him near the landing pad. She kept her distance as if an invisible wall stood between them. Every time Mason tried to approach, she turned away. Her golden eyes no longer met his. The memory of that night in the hangar burned in his mind. The shock in her face, the red blush spreading through her fur, the pain in her voice. He had made a mistake, and now she was gone from him in every way that mattered. Still, he couldn't stop caring. He found himself glancing at her during briefings, during meals, even during patrols. She moved with the same grace as always, her silver armor shining under the harsh lights, but something about her seemed colder. She spoke only when necessary, never laughed, never lingered. One afternoon, during maintenance duty, Mason sat on the outpost steps, staring at the sky. The twin suns were setting, turning the desert orange and gold. The colors reminded him of her eyes. He sighed softly. "You really messed up, Reeves," he muttered to himself. A shadow moved behind him. He turned, but it wasn't her, just another soldier walking past. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment over and over, wishing he could take it back. He hadn't looked at her out of disrespect. It was an accident, a moment of surprise. But how could he explain that? Words felt too small for what he wanted to say. Finally, one quiet evening, he decided to try again. He found her sitting near the comms tower, her back against the wall, watching the stars. The desert wind brushed against her fur, making it shimmer faintly in the light. She looked peaceful, but also alone. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Sareen," he said softly. She didn't move. Her tail swayed once, but her voice was cold. "You should not be here," he hesitated. "I just wanted to talk." "There is nothing to say," she replied without looking at him. "You looked when you should not have. You broke trust." Her words stung, but Mason didn't back away. "I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't know your customs. I was just—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Just surprised. You looked different. Not as a soldier, but as you." That made her ears twitch slightly, but she said nothing. Mason continued, his voice softer now.
"I know I hurt you.
And I can't change that. But please believe me, I never wanted to make you feel ashamed. You're the last person I'd ever want to hurt." The silence stretched long between them. The only sound was the hum of the tower behind them and the low whisper of the wind. Finally, Sareen turned her head slightly, just enough for him to see her profile. "Among the Valari," she said quietly, "to be seen without armor means one of two things, love or betrayal. You are not one of us." So I did not know which one it was. Mason's breath caught. "Love or betrayal," he repeated softly. She looked away again, her golden eyes reflecting the stars. "Do not speak of it," she said. "It is not meant for humans to understand." He nodded slowly. "Maybe not. But I understand pain, and I can see it in you, even if you try to hide it." Her tail stopped moving. She said nothing, but the silence between them felt different this time. Not angry, not cold, just heavy, full of feelings neither could express. After a moment, Mason stood up. "I'll go," he said quietly, "but I'll be here if you ever want to talk again." As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Mason." He turned, hope flickering in his chest. She hesitated, her expression unreadable. "Humans are strange," she murmured. "You make mistakes. But you still try." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, we're stubborn like that." Her eyes softened just a little. "Do not try too hard," she said. "Sometimes broken things cannot be fixed." And with that, she looked back to the stars. Mason walked away slowly, his heart heavy but somehow lighter than before. Maybe she wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet. But at least she had spoken to him again, and that was enough for now. The quiet of Velnar 9 did not last. One morning, the outpost's alarms blared, piercing through the still desert air. Red lights flashed, casting harsh shadows across the walls. The hum of the generators was drowned out by the roar of engines and the grinding of metal. Rogue drones had breached the perimeter. They were faster, smarter, and more dangerous than any training simulations. Mason's heart raced. He grabbed his rifle and sprinted toward the central plaza, where the drones were advancing. Dust swirled around his boots, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. The soldiers were already engaged, but the drones were relentless. Through the chaos, he spotted her, Sareen. She was in the middle of the plaza, her plasma blade cutting through a swarm of drones like a silver streak. Sparks flew, metal screeched, and the Valari's tail flicked with precise, deadly rhythm. For a moment, Mason forgot everything else. He couldn't believe how fast, how skilled, how fearless she was. But then he saw it. A drone aimed directly at her flank, its targeting system locked. Time slowed. Without thinking, Mason ran. He dove in front of her, pushing her aside just as the drone fired. The explosion rocked him, throwing him across the ground. Pain shot through his chest, white-hot and unbearable. Sareen screamed, a sound Mason had never heard before. Raw, urgent, filled with fear. She dropped her blade for a second and caught him, holding him in her strong arms. Her golden eyes were wide, full of panic, and her red-tinted fur bristled in a way he had never seen. "You fool!" she shouted, her voice breaking. "Why did you— I couldn't let it hit you," Mason gasped, blood spreading across his chest. He could barely breathe, barely see. I can't lose you." Sarian's hands pressed against the wound, her claws trembling. Sparks from a nearby drone showered around them, but she ignored them. Her voice shook as she spoke words he barely understood. "Stay with me. Human, stay." The drones continued to attack, but something had shifted. The other soldiers rallied, forming a defensive perimeter. Sarian rose with him in her arms, her strength unwavering despite the panic in her eyes. Together they moved toward safety, dodging blasts and cutting through machines that tried to block them. Mason's vision blurred. Every step hurt, but he clung to her. Every time he faltered, her golden eyes met his, steadying him. He realized in that moment of chaos that he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for her. Finally, they reached the med bay. Serene laid him gently on the stretcher. Her red-tinted fur was still visible, and her tail was curled tightly around her legs. She stayed beside him as the medics worked, her claws brushing lightly against his shoulder, unwilling to let him go. "You scared me," she whispered, her voice soft now, almost fragile. I thought I would lose you." Mason coughed, a weak smile forming. "Guess. I finally made you talk," he murmured. Her ears twitched, her fur deepening in crimson again, but this time it wasn't shame. It was fear, worry, and something more. A feeling Mason couldn't name but understood in his chest. The room was quiet except for the med bay monitors beeping, but the bond between them felt stronger than any alarm, any explosion, any war outside. In that moment, the world had narrowed to just two people, a human and a Valari, connected by danger, by fear, by trust. For Mason, the pain in his chest was sharp, but the thought of Sareen beside him made it bearable. He realized he didn't want her to ever leave his side again, not as a mercenary, not as an alien warrior, but as someone he cared for deeply. Sareen stayed there until he was stable, her fur still tinged red, her golden eyes never leaving his face. She didn't speak much, but her presence said everything. When Mason finally drifted into a shallow sleep, he felt her hand brush against his, and for the first time since the accident in the hangar, he felt that same warmth he had felt during those quiet nights under the desert stars. Only now, it was stronger, forged in the fire of survival. The outpost had been attacked, drones destroyed, and the alarms had stopped. But something more important had happened. A bond had been tested and survived. And somewhere deep inside, Mason knew. He would face 1,000 firestorms if it meant keeping her alive. The medbay on Velnar 9 smelled of antiseptic and burnt circuits. The bright white lights made Mason squint, but he could feel Sareen sitting nearby, her tail curled tightly around her legs. Her red-tinted fur had faded slightly from the panic of the attack, but the golden glow in her eyes remained, alert, worried and strangely gentle. Mason tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his chest. Sareen was immediately at his side, placing her strong, warm hands on his shoulders. "Do not move," she said firmly, her voice low but urgent. "You are weak." "I'm fine," Mason muttered, though his words were weak. "Just sore," she didn't answer. Instead, she stayed beside him, silent, watching him breathe, making sure every machine around him showed normal readings. He noticed for the first time how careful she was, how even her claws, deadly in combat, were gentle here. For hours, neither spoke. Mason lay back, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the chaos of the day, the drones, the explosions, the sharp heat of the blast. And then he thought about her strength, her courage, the fear in her voice when he had taken the blast. "You risked your life," she said suddenly, her voice soft, almost a whisper. Mason blinked. "I told you. I couldn't let it hit you. Not you." Her golden eyes met his, and for the first time he saw something beyond fear, concern, care, and perhaps something more he didn't yet understand. Her tail twitched slowly. Among the Valari, red means shame, but it also sometimes means attachment, caring, fear for someone's life. Mason's heart skipped. "So, that night in the hangar," he said softly, "when you turned red, it wasn't just shame. Her ears twitched and she looked away, focusing on the floor. No, you frightened me, but also something else. Her voice was almost inaudible. I did not know what it meant. Mason reached out slowly, careful not to startle her. Serene, it's okay. You don't have to hide how you feel. She hesitated, then allowed her claws to brush against his hand. The touch was light, but it made his chest ache in a good way. The ache of connection, of trust, of understanding. They stayed like that for hours, talking softly, sharing memories of their worlds. Mason spoke of Earth, the rain, the seas, the green forests that stretched for miles. Sareen told him about Valara Prime, the red deserts, the twin suns, and the endless dunes. Her voice grew warmer with each story, her golden eyes reflecting a light Mason could not describe. You humans have strange ways of feeling, she said after a pause. You care so openly even when it is dangerous. Mason smiled faintly. We have to. Otherwise, life is too short to be afraid all the time. Sareen considered this, her tail flicking softly. Maybe that is why you are alive. And why I am still here, watching over you. The thought hit Mason harder than the blast ever had. She was here for him. Not out of duty. Not out of orders. But because she wanted to be. Because she cared. Days passed and Mason's strength returned. He could sit up, walk short distances, and even laugh a little at the absurdity of their desert outpost. Serene stayed close, though she no longer hovered over him like before. She gave him space, yet never left him alone. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in gold and crimson, Mason turned to her. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? She asked, though her ears twitched in curiosity. For staying, for trusting me again, for caring. Her golden eyes softened and her tail swayed slowly. Do not say that lightly, human. You have seen me. Vulnerable. That is dangerous, but you are different. You are not like the others, he smiled faintly. Maybe humans aren't all terrible, he said. Sareen's lips twitched in a small, almost unnoticeable smile. Perhaps, she replied. The night stretched on, quiet except for the hum of the outpost. Mason realized something profound, that the bond between them was no longer fragile. It had been tested in fire, in danger, and in fear, and now it had grown stronger. He reached for her hand again. This time she let him hold it fully. Her fur brushed against his skin, warm and soft. No words were needed, no explanations. Just two beings from different worlds, side by side, connected by trust, by care, by survival. As Mason closed his eyes that night, he knew that whatever battles awaited them, whatever dangers Velnar 9 or the galaxy could throw, they would face them together. And for the first time in a long time, he felt completely, undeniably, at peace. Weeks passed since the firestorm at the outpost. The drones were destroyed, the alarms silenced, and Velnar 9 had returned to its deceptive calm. The desert wind still whispered across the dunes, and the twin suns painted the skies in shades of orange and crimson. But something deeper had shifted. Between Mason Reeves and Sarin Veltar, Mason had recovered fully. His chest bore only a faint scar, a reminder of that day when he risked everything for her. He walked through the outpost with confidence now, but his steps always carried him near her. Sareen no longer avoided him. She moved with him in quiet synchrony, though she still spoke sparingly. Yet her golden eyes followed him, warm and alert, and her tail occasionally flicked in ways that made him smile. That morning, Mason found her outside near the edge of the cliffs overlooking the endless desert. She was not in her armor, only a simple tunic that allowed her silver fur to shimmer in the sunlight. The winds brushed against her face, lifting strands of fur, and her golden eyes reflected the horizon. You like this view? Mason asked, approaching slowly. Sarian's ears twitched. It reminds me of home. Red sands, burning skies. Yet it is quieter here. Mason nodded. I think Earth could never compete with this sky, he said softly. But I think I found a favorite color. Her eyes flicked to him, curious. Oh, and what color is that? He smiled, a quiet, steady smile. Red. Her fur flushed, not the deep, startled red of the hanger, but a gentle, soft crimson that spread across her cheeks and ears. She looked away, her tail curling slightly, unsure of how to respond. You mean that? She asked quietly, her voice trembling in a way that made his heart ache. I do, Mason said, stepping closer, because it reminds me of you. Of the first time I saw your courage, the first time I saw you smile, the first time I realized I couldn't let you face the world alone. Sarian's golden eyes widened. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind danced around them, carrying the distant hum of the outpost and the soft cries of desert birds. The silence was heavy yet comforting. Then slowly she reached out her hand. Mason took it without hesitation. Their fingers intertwined, and for the first time, they did not speak of war or rules or customs. Only of trust, of care, of the fragile bond that had been tested and had survived. You humans, Sareen murmured, her voice soft, almost shy. You are strange, reckless, loud, fearless, and yet you see things we do not, Mason chuckled. Maybe we just learn the hard way. Her tail swished gently, brushing against his leg. Perhaps, but I am glad you are here, by my side. Not as a soldier, not as a stranger, but as something else. He smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the desert sun. I'm glad too. For a moment they stood there side by side, watching the twin suns sink slowly below the horizon. The sky ignited in crimson, orange, and gold, a mirror of the red that now tinged her fur. Mason realized that the battle outside had been dangerous. Yes, but nothing compared to the quiet fight of earning trust, of bridging worlds. And in that red dawn he knew that they had done it together. Sarian tilted her head slightly, ears flicking in amusement, and whispered, Do humans often speak so openly? Not often enough, Mason admitted. But maybe we should start. The wind carried her soft laughter across the cliffs, a sound he had waited weeks to hear. And in that sound Mason found peace, hope, and a promise that no matter how harsh the galaxy became, no matter how dangerous the next storm, they would face it together. She looked at him, her golden eyes deep and sincere. Then, we will face it together, she said. Yes, Mason said, his voice strong. Together. The twin suns disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving the sky painted in deep crimson. And under that red dawn of Velnar 9, two hearts, human and Valerie, beat in quiet harmony. The war outside could rage. The universe could throw fire and chaos at them. But here, in that moment, there was only trust, courage, and a connection that had survived every test. And that was enough.